First question is, why do you want to be mayor, and what sets you apart from the other candidates?
Yeah, so this city is amazing. We are in the state of Florida, and everyone wants to be in the state of Florida now. And we're at the top of Florida, which makes us really valuable to companies coming in. They can do day trips to Boston, New York. Also very valuable to warehousing and manufacturing. Unless your market is Latin America, you want to be here. And we have 3 freight railroads, 2 major highways, deep water port, and we're the only city between Richmond and Miami that I-95 runs through. So if you think about it, like, you have to come to Jacksonville. We're a city of 1 million people, incredibly diverse. And so you look at all of that, and then you say, well, why do we have the highest homicide rate in the state of Florida and continues to go up? Why are our literacy rates, third grade literacy rates, at 47%, gone from 60 to 47 in 6 years? Why is our infrastructure crumbling in so many parts of the city? And really, when you look at that, we have all the puzzle pieces, we just need to put them together. And for so long, those puzzle pieces just haven't been put together, and I talked about it at the debate yesterday, we have this very strong old boys network here that has wanted to hold on to power. So it's not that we can't break through our potential and be this great city that we all know we can be. It's just that the kind of powers that be for so long have wanted to kind of retain that power. So to me, it's just such a great opportunity, because I see the city within 4-8 years to really break through and really be the best city in the Southeast. And I'm really excited to be able to do that.
What sets you apart from other candidates?
Yeah, so I have a really unique background. To be mayor, I'm a former teacher, top 3rd grade and 5th grade bilingual, so really understand, that's why the literacy rates are so critical, and I really understand what that means and how to kind of move forward on that. And I'm a lawyer, and I own an infrastructure financing firm. So over the last about 10, 11 years, I've helped finance over $1 billion in infrastructure projects around the country. And it's something that, what cities spend a lot of time and money on is our infrastructure projects. And how we build, where we build, really dictates kind of what our policies are and what we care about. And so having that experience of leveraging our federal and state funds to do the big things we need to do in this city, whether it's the sewer system at Neptune Beach, which is in dire need, Normandy Boulevard, which needs to be 4-laned, these really big $100 million projects, those we should be going out to the federal government and leveraging money. The potholes, the things that make it potholes, sidewalks, parks, lighting, those are what really create value to communities and make it so businesses can thrive. And so that's where we really should be putting our infrastructure dollars.
What is the biggest problem right now in Jackson? How would you solve it?
Yeah, I mean, crime is, if people don't feel safe, and if they aren't safe, then nothing else really matters if you don't. And as a mom of a 9 and 11-year-old, if I don't feel that my kids are safe, and I don't feel that I'm safe in my neighborhood, at my work, and so forth, then everything else kind of falls to the wayside. So we really have to tackle our crime issue. And in doing that, we need to start looking at crime in a more proactive way. We need to make sure that the sheriff's office has all of the resources it needs. And one of the things during, when we were getting the hundreds of millions of dollars in COVID money, one of the things I did was direct $75,000 to the SWAT team, particularly, to make sure that they were outfitted and make sure that they had what they needed. So, but we also need to look at things proactively. And it's something that I've done since I've gotten onto council back in 2019. I shut down the illegal gambling cafes. They were destroying neighborhoods and really sucking resources from JSO. When you have 400 calls to one business over the course of a few months, that's taking officers off the street. It's really putting pressure on the resources. I also passed, and this I'm very excited about, passed a landmark sex trafficking bill back in 2020. And one of the things that did was raise the stripping age to 21. So raised it from 18 to 21. A lot of people don't realize that it used to be 18, but the reality of it is there were girls all over the city who were being recruited to go to the strip clubs when they're in high school. 15, 16, 17 years old, and that is the most vulnerable time for trafficking. And so the bill raised the stripping age to 21. The strip club sued, which as a lawyer I knew they would, and we've been in litigation now for 3 years. As of a week ago, Monday, just on the very edge of National Women's Month, it's very exciting, the federal courts determined that yes, indeed, we can regulate strip clubs based on age, and that's constitutional. So we're actually the first in the country to do so. And the state of Texas copied this bill that I wrote. And so they've been waiting, their court has been waiting for our precedent. So today, actually, JSO is going out and enforcing that, and going into all the clubs and making sure that nobody is in the clubs dancing who's under 21. Those are the sorts of things that really impact crime throughout the city. And so the city needs to think about what can we do to help on the proactive side. And then I would say getting our reading scores up. We have 47% literacy rates we have middle schools in this city that have 25% literacy rates. We don't have any trade schools anymore, and we have these literacy rates that are plummeting. And so you really can't reduce crime if we are graduating kids who can't read. There's no real path. And so it's all encompassing to reduce crime. And so we really need to be thinking about that. And then the last thing is infrastructure. It really matters. It is proven throughout the country that if you focus on infrastructure in high crime areas, and that's lighting, and that's making sure that the infrastructure itself is working, then that helps reduce crime as well.
So we're going to shift gears and talk about climate change. And what kind of specific ideas I'm going to read you the question just as everybody else is getting it. How specifically will Jacksonville be more resilient to climate change in 4 years if you're elected?
Yeah, this is something, representing San Marco, this is something that is a big issue for the city, for the residents, and for the businesses, and just for the livelihoods of people throughout the city. And so we need to be very intentional. There are things that we can do. I just got the final approvals for the pump station in San Marco. There are specific things like pump stations that can work in various places, but we also have to address the river itself and address the intercoastal and the flooding that happens at the beach for that. And so we need to look at different solutions and solutions that work together. And part of that is coming up with a master plan, because if we address it in just one area, so if we address flooding in one specific part of Ortega, say, that's going to have an impact further down the river, or further up the river, I should say, right? And so we need to be very intentional to make sure that we have a plan so that our solutions match what we need and don't cause other problems going forward. And I do think opening the tributaries, that's something that we really need to do to allow the water to flow naturally where it's supposed to flow.
The resilience director has come out with a report. That report, though, you don't consider a plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, what the resilience officer came out with is kind of the state of play right now, which is very helpful. We need to understand the state of play, but now we need to say, here's the state of play. Now we need to come up with a plan that we can then, again, there's a lot of federal resources and state resources that we can tap into to help with resiliency in the city, but we need to have a plan in order to do that. And in a plan that, and this is really a benchmark of my campaign, that we need to start looking at the city in terms of 10, 20, 30 years from now, not what are we going to do for next year? What are we going to do for the year after? But what are we going to do for my kids, grandkids, and what are we going to do today that's going to have a long-lasting effect?
Okay. City's greatest infrastructure need. How would you tackle that? What is it, and how would you tackle it?
Yeah, I think that the city's greatest infrastructure need are neighborhoods that have the crumbling infrastructure, because we have basic, and it's what people really care about, right? When you go out of your house, you're driving your car and you run into the potholes, you have sidewalks that are broken, you have streetlights that don't work. Those are the real quality of life issues that we need to focus on. And I have said since I have been in council that government and local government has a very narrow lane. And if we focus on that narrow lane, which would be education, public safety, and infrastructure, basic infrastructure, then we can do it, and we can do it well. And so what we need to do is redirect money, redirect the hundreds of millions of dollars we're set to spend on the Skyway, which does not help anyone and it is not an infrastructure need, to the basic infrastructure needs. So then we set the opportunity and the stage for success. And that's, with my background growing up in a Cuban family, people come to this country, Cubans came to this country because of the opportunity and that the stage was set. And from the local government, we need to set the stage for businesses to be successful. And that means focusing on the basic roads, sidewalks, and lighting.
You've mentioned the Skyway before.
Yes.
If you redirect the money, and it sounds like that would be your funding plan, would that pay for all of the infrastructure needs?
Well, and there's a lot of other, I think it's kind of multifaceted, right? So the large ones, like I said, we need to 4-lane Normandy Boulevard. It's now a $100 million project. It's gone from 50 million to 100 million with kind of no end in sight. It has to be done. It's going to become unsafe for the people who live out there. It's the congestion and so forth, that it has to be done. Those projects, we need to aggressively go after federal and state funds to leverage the funds that we have here. And for the larger projects like that, that's what we should be doing. And then, but we also should not be using our local dollars to fix state roads, which is what we do. Phillips Highway is a state highway. Our local gas tax dollars shouldn't be going to that because you've already paid gas tax. Every time you go to the pump, you pay 54 cents for every gallon of gas. That 54 cents is divided between federal, state, and local taxes. And so the federal and state taxes, that's what flows down to take care of those state roads. And so we need to, if we really focus on getting FDOT to fix their roads, and we focus our local money on the basics, then that's really how we fund it. And again, I mean, funding the Skyway, hundreds of millions of dollars makes a huge difference. It really does.
Let's talk about TIAA Bankfield, right across the street. So who should pay, who would pay for the multi-million-dollar renovations at the football stadium, and why, if you were elected? Yeah,
so my family and I love the Jaguars. We have season tickets. Our 11-year-old and 9-year-old love going to the games. And there are a lot of NFL retirees who come and retire in Jacksonville. So the team is really important. That said, any deal that happens going forward with the Jaguars, we need to make sure that the people at the table that are represented at the table are the taxpayers. And so that's something that I'm committed to do, to really make sure that the taxpayers are represented in any deal, and make sure that anything that we do going forward has a significant commitment by the team and the NFL itself, financial commitment, and has a long-term commitment to stay here in Jacksonville, because that's really important, that if we are going to invest any more money in the team, that we make sure that we really have that commitment, both financial commitment and long-term commitment.
What about taxing a tax to then help support the renovations?
We do not need any more taxes in this city. There have been 4 taxes in 7 years. There was a sales tax back in 2016. There was another sales tax, and then there was the gas tax, and then there was a property tax increase. The last 3 I've been on council for and have fought against all 3 of them. People in the city are tired of being taxed, and when you talk about affordability and you talk about, I grew up in a family, I was a Head Start kid, grew up in a family where it really mattered, and most people, it really matters when you go to the gas pump and your taxes are doubled. It really matters. We can't keep making it expensive for people to live. Government's job is government's job is to not make it more expensive for people to live.
Are you in favor of increasing the amount of money that the city of Jacksonville gives to both Florida and Georgia in order to keep the Florida-Georgia game in Jacks for years to come?
I think having the Florida-Georgia game here is critical. It is almost a 100-year tradition. So I am definitely committed to making sure that it stays.
Okay. That was a short answer. Okay, so how would you tackle Jacksonville's affordable housing crisis? That's one question. And then to follow it up, you know what? Let's keep it that simple, and we'll go to the next one. So how would you tackle Jacksonville's affordable housing crisis?
Sure. A lot of the affordability, again, affordability in general is tough for people today, you know, between groceries and gas and so forth. But what we really need to do, and one of the things that we need to do day one, is to revamp our entire permitting system. Because, and it goes to what I was saying, that government shouldn't be making it more expensive for you to live. And when the government creates bureaucracy and red tape, which is what has happened year over year over year, and has created this kind of incredibly opaque permitting system that is incredibly expensive to kind of weave your way through. Those costs are then passed on to the consumer. And so one of the things, and one of the ways that cities across the country have been able to really grow over the last 10 years is to reduce that red tape and make it so that bureaucracy is lessened, and so the cost to actually build are lessened. So we need to look at that, and we need to, you know, for multifamily, it's, you know, parking requirements. These kind of 2-car parking requirements adds an enormous amount of cost onto the project, which can't be recouped because a parking garage is empty space. And so it makes the project itself more expensive, and then that's passed on.
So for affordable housing, this particular question, you're talking about building more homes.
Well, I think that when people come to build, partly what makes the homes so expensive is that to build them makes it expensive.
Okay.
And so it's when people come to, whether they're building multifamily or single family homes, if there's a lot of bureaucracy, which we have right now in the system, and it's very expensive, then those costs are passed on to the consumer, and it makes that building, that house, that apartment complex artificially more expensive. So that's really the first thing that we need to do, and then make sure that we're bringing in higher wage jobs. We need to aggressively go out and bring in higher wage jobs. We have the second best healthcare system in the country outside of Houston, and Houston has Baylor and University of Texas, and but we need to be going and getting those high wage medical jobs to come in. We have 25% of people who live in Jacksonville are connected to the military, whether it's veterans, whether it's active duty. We should be going out and getting those defense jobs and those defense contracting firms. The port, the more we grow the port, the more longshoremen we have. Longshoremen jobs, port jobs are very well-paying jobs. And so we need to make sure that people have good paying jobs in this city, and that will also combat the general affordability.
Thank you. I'm asking a couple extra addendum questions, so I appreciate you responding. All right, so talking about the sheriff's office, do you believe the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office budget should increase, remain the same, or be partially reallocated to other agencies? And then, of course, why?
Yeah, I think that the sheriff's office needs the funding that they request, and that we need to make sure that they are fully funded, because we have a growing city. We are now 1 million people, and we need to make sure that the sheriff's office has all of the resources it needs. We also need to make sure that the sheriff's office really tackles the recruitment and retention problem that it's having, as well as the fire department. There is a serious recruitment and retention problem in public safety in this city. And we need to get together to figure that out, because again, public safety is really the key to high quality of life. And so we really need to make sure that we are focused on it. And it goes back to kind of the crime issue generally, right? We need to make sure that the sheriff's office has all the resources it needs, but also look at things proactively and resolve the proactive issues as well.
So we talked about crime already. I mean, well, when I asked you what is the biggest problem in Jacksonville, you said crime and safety. So this next question goes into more about the crime element. I'll ask you if you'd rather just say go back to the first, we can do that. But we know crime is down in the state of Florida, as the governor has recently said many times, but in Jacksonville, that's not the case. And so give us an idea of the steps you'll take on how you'll work with the governor to tackle Duval's crime rate. Is it much of what you've said already, or do you have more to say?
Well, it's that, but I also stand with the governor on his stance on illegal immigration. And being a first generation myself, and my husband being a first generation, we understand legal immigration is key to the country and so forth, and it's what the governor is really focused on. Illegal immigration, we have got to stop it, and we've got to Florida is a border state. And unfortunately, it hasn't been recognized as such by the federal government, so we don't get the same resources that the southern border and the northern border states get, but we really are. And so the governor is doing everything he can to really tackle the illegal immigration issue. And I really stand with him too on making sure that the bill that was passed, that in fact one of my opponents voted for, that gave illegal immigrants in the state of Florida driver's licenses and in-state tuition is overturned and reversed, because that contributes to the crime as well. And especially with the human trafficking and all the human trafficking work I've been doing, it's really critical to make sure that we get a handle on the illegal immigration. And that's one of the things that we can really work with the governor hand in hand, because Governor DeSantis is doing a great job.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Stepping back from that answer then, are you saying there's a link between illegal immigration and crime?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at human trafficking, it is now more lucrative for people to be trafficked across the border than it is drugs to be trafficked. And just in Clay County, they had the largest fentanyl bust ever in the state of Florida. And that was directly tied to smuggling across the border and coming over. So there's definitely a tie, and it's something that we need to make sure that our communities are safe, and we need to make sure that we know who's here, and that we keep people safe. And all the human trafficking work I've been doing, we can't focus on the human trafficking and then when we focus on the human trafficking, we also need to focus on the illegal immigration, because they really do go hand in hand.
Okay. Single most important contributor to violent crime in Jacksonville is what? And what will you do about it?
Yeah, I would say the gang issue. We have a serious gang problem in this city, and we need to start addressing it aggressively. And if you look at other cities throughout the country that have been able to lower crime and lower homicides, that's what they've done. That they've really gone after the gang problem and gone after and really kind of targeted it. So that's something that we really need to focus on if we're going to reduce our homicides.
Do you agree that politics is dividing the nation?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm running. I really think that we need to be able to talk to each other. We need to be able to sit at a table and kind of hammer out solutions. And it used to be that we could do that. And I think that the way to kind of get back to that is through local government, because the reality of it is what happens in local government impacts people's lives every day. And it's what makes local government so exciting, because they're really basic issues, right? It's crime, it's how well your kids are educated, if they're being educated the way you want them to be educated. It's the potholes, it's the trash. These are issues that we should be able to sit across the table and negotiate and hammer out, because we're never going to break through our potential in this city and really be a city of greatness if we can't kind of all get together and come up with solutions and really hammer it out.
Let's talk about advertising.
Yes.
So you have engaged in some negative advertising. Tell me why. What was your thinking along that line?
So the very first negative ad during this campaign was the very first ad people saw on TV, which came from my opponent, came from Daniel Davis. And it was on December 26th. I remember because my 9 and 11-year-old, we had spent Christmas driving around to every fire station in the city, dropping cookies off and thanking the firefighters. And so the 26th was really their day that they could kind of play with what they got and so forth. And they came down and said, there's a nasty ad about you, Mom. And that's what started it off. And so we waited a few weeks to kind of go up on air. We had some positive, but we realized that if he was going to set the tone for negative, I couldn't just sit back
and take it and not respond. And so that's what we've been doing. And everything that I have up and is all contrast. So there are votes that he has taken, like we talked about the immigration vote. There's he voted to allow illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses and in-state tuition. He voted when he was in the state house to make it easier for unlicensed facilities, unlicensed religious facilities, to cover up sexual assaults against children. Those are votes that he took, and he fully supported the gas tax. These are things that, to me, it's very important for people to know. These are true contrasts. And unfortunately, I'll just say that his attack ads have been, they spent about $5 million attacking me and my family. And that is unprecedented in this city.
Do you think the negative attacks, and speak only for yourself, please, for the ones that on your side, have been effective? Are they getting whatever the goal was that you had in mind? Is it being accomplished?
I think it is getting people to understand what their choice is. Their choice is me, who has worked very hard to make sure taxes are low in this city, who works very hard to make sure that parents have choice and that parents are empowered, and who stands with Governor DeSantis on immigration and school choice and those sorts of things. And my opponent does not. And so I do believe that my ads show a true contrast. And but I'll say, and I think that women tend to get bad advice when they're running for office, because a lot of women are told to just kind of take the attacks and don't, and be positive and be nice. And it's very bad advice for women, and I've been working in domestic violence my whole life, and it's the worst thing to say to a woman who's being assaulted and attacked, to just take it and be positive. So unfortunately, it was not the way we were going to run the campaign, but we were given no choice.
Thank you. Okay, so this goes back, we're hopping all over the place, but should development be restricted in areas with known flood risks?
Yeah, I think this is something that was worked on prior to me getting on council, where there were more restrictions and put on developers, and like numbers of feet you could be from certain wetlands and stuff. And I do think it's important to not pave the city, right? There are some ways that you can reduce flood risks by having natural barriers. And it's also, we have to remember that we have to be good neighbors to the neighbors who are already there. And it's unfair and if someone has a home somewhere or a business and the value of their business goes down, or the value of their home is decreased because someone else built something that's now causing flooding, that's a serious issue. And it's a serious issue that we see all over the city. And so it's something that we need to really continually look at, because we do need to protect our neighborhoods. And again, representing San Marco, we have flooding. When there are big storms, there is serious flooding. Ortega has serious flooding. Riverside, the beach has serious flooding from the intercoastal. And so we need to look at those natural barriers and make sure that we're not making the problem worse.
You are under investigation by your own colleagues for disclosing your husband, or for not disclosing your husband's role in the JEA sale process. So can you explain why you did not disclose that information?
Well, first I'll say that what they're doing in council was completely fed by Daniel Davis's communications director and his consultant. So it is a complete weaponization of government. My colleagues know it. And that is why some of my colleagues who were on the original SIC committee said this is nothing but a political ploy against a political opponent. And I think that people should be very nervous about that, because never in the history of consolidation has the government been used as a weaponized against a political opponent. And they know that I've complied with every law. They know that there is nothing there, yet they continue to try to do it because they're trying to protect the mayor's chosen mayoral candidate. And that should be very nerve-wracking to people. The weaponization of government is something that is, I mean, you talked about being divisive. You know, we've seen the weaponization of government on the federal level, whether it's the IRS going after churches and so forth. We've never seen it on the local level. And that's what this is. And I think it, you know, it bears out in what we're seeing and what people are saying.
Go back to your husband, though, for me. You chose not to disclose that information. Why?
Well, with my husband, to be clear too, at that point, he was working with the FBI to make sure that Aaron Zahn and Ryan Wanamaker, that the case would stick. And so that was always, I'm the only person who has worked for a federal law enforcement agency, and I would never want to stand in the way of the U.S. attorneys in being able to put their case forward.
Did they tell you not to?
And, you know, look, I can't reveal what those were discussions that, and so, and I do want to remind you that there were several colleagues that never filled it out. And it was the form, I've always complied with every ethical and legal requirement. The form was voluntary. And we have, you know, one of my colleagues works directly for Daniel Davis, and we know he was working to try to sell JEA. That's why he took $300,000 into the chamber. And that particular colleague has never to this day filled anything out. So.
Well, this is a follow-up to that, so you may have already answered this. So would you agree the records released by the committee appear to show your husband was deeply involved, at least in early discussions and meetings with one of the bidders?
Deeply involved? No, I don't. And again, it's the, to be clear, my husband talked to Mike Weinstein and Jody Brooks, who both, if you remember, Jody Brooks had resigned from JEA, and because my husband was the only one on the board who got a resolution passed that said JEA could not be sold, that Aaron Zahn ignored. And then he spoke with Mike Weinstein and Jody Brooks about trying to, if the ITN went through, trying to make sure that it stayed a local municipal utility. And that's what they were working on. So I don't think that, I'm not buying the characterization that Daniel Davis's campaign wants the committee to buy. And that's why, if you look at what's, you know, what my colleagues have said, who were actually on the committee originally, they've said that this is all trumped up, and this is all just weaponization of government to help a political opponent.
We're on the last question here, and that is, should Confederate monuments be removed from public property?
No, I think that we need to understand our history, and we should really understand all the history of Jacksonville. So I think contextualization is important, but I don't believe in just tearing out history.
I always like to add, would you like to ask or add anything else? Would you like to add anything else I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, you know, I'm really excited about moving the city forward. I think that it's important that people know that, unfortunately, our median household income, while the state of Florida's has gone up, ours has gone down over the last 10 years. That, you know, when you look at jobs, Governor DeSantis has brought in 425,000 jobs a year into this state, and the chamber claims less than 1% of those jobs. Getting 3,000 jobs out of 425,000 for a city of 1 million people is not something to boast about. We really need to have someone run this city who understands business, has been in business, and doesn't have a track record of, I mean, you look at the chamber, and the chamber in the last, since Daniel Davis has been there, it's lost 34% of revenue, yet they've doubled his salary. No business would do that. That's not the type of CEO we need.